We've all been there. You open a software tutorial, and the instructor tells you exactly where to click, what values to enter, and which boxes to check. You follow along, matching their pace perfectly. By the end, you're looking at a flawless envelope icon. It feels great. You've successfully executed the steps, and for a brief moment, you feel like an absolute pro. Then you close the tutorial. You decide to apply this newly acquired skill to draw a coffee cup. But staring at a blank canvas, you realize you have no idea how to determine the light source or layer a gradient. Instead of a cup, you end up with something that looks suspiciously like a roll of toilet paper with a handle. Tutorials of this nature excel at task completion, yet they often bypass the transfer of actual skills. They guide the hand while leaving the mind stationary. Flawlessly replicating a task under strict guidance creates a dangerous illusion of competence. It masks our underlying ignorance, making us think we've acquired a highly adaptable skill when we've really just painted by numbers. This diagram shows the cognitive mechanics behind that failure. Think about driving in an unfamiliar city. If you use a GPS, you get a low-friction experience. A voice tells you to turn right in 50 yards. You act on that command for a few seconds, make the turn, and forget it. Working from a physical map demands significantly more effort. You have to locate your position, read street names, and constantly cross-reference your surroundings. That extra friction is exactly what forces the brain to build a spatial understanding of the area. The GPS method works until a road is closed or a landmark sign gets painted over. Because you haven't been building a mental map of the neighborhood, you have no way to self-correct or troubleshoot an alternate route. Highly explicit directions prioritize immediate speed. They get you to your destination quickly, but ensure you'll be lost the moment you step off the paved path. This reveals a fundamental rule of learning. If a path is made entirely frictionless, the brain refuses to internalize the route. Instructional design often swings between two flawed extremes. The first is that purely step-by-step GPS method, which guarantees a quick result but lacks any real depth. On the other end is the DIY wilderness approach. This is where you drop a learner in the desert and force them to master every underlying principle and theory of cartography before they ever take a single step. While this builds genuine expertise, it is agonizingly slow. For most practical applications, requiring someone to become a master theorist before they can act is massive overkill. This chart helps define where tutorials fall short. Step-by-step instructions teach explicit rules, visible, highly specific actions that are easy to explain precisely. However, actual mastery lives in the tacit rules. This is the massive, hidden block of unspoken judgment, feel, and pattern recognition. It's knowing how to balance a composition or read the subtle shifts in a customer's tone. These tacit skills can only be developed organically. A learner has to observe numerous examples and experiment themselves to begin recognizing the underlying patterns. Since explicit instructions cannot convey tacit skills and theoretical overloads take far too long, we need a mechanism that forces the learner to bridge that gap through their own effort. That middle ground is called wayfinding. Effective wayfinding relies on a central paradox. To make someone learn more effectively, an instructor must intentionally give them less information. This is intentional friction. By leaving specific gaps in the instructions, like an unmapped river on a trail, the instructor forces the learner to stop, evaluate their environment, and problem-solve a way forward. That middle ground is called wayfinding. Effective wayfinding relies on a central paradox. To make someone learn more effectively, an instructor must intentionally give them less information. This is intentional friction. By leaving specific gaps in the instructions, like an unmapped river on a trail, the instructor forces the learner to stop, evaluate their environment, and problem-solve a way forward. That middle ground is called wayfinding. Effective wayfinding relies on a central paradox. To make someone learn more effectively, an instructor must intentionally give them less information. This is intentional friction. By leaving specific gaps in the instructions, like an unmapped river on a trail, the instructor forces the learner to stop, evaluate their environment, and problem-solve a way forward. Adaptability is forged when the brain is forced to navigate its way out of carefully designed confusion. Educators must shift their focus to encourage this processing. By providing raw examples and letting learners extract the rules themselves, the instruction moves from passive observation to active engagement. A practical blueprint for this is Michael Allen's CCAF model: context, challenge, activity, and feedback. First, you establish a real-world context to frame the problem. Then you introduce a challenge, a specific stimulus that demands the learner take action. The model then requires the learner to act, performing a physical or mental activity to solve the challenge. Immediately after, they receive feedback reflecting the effectiveness of that choice, completing the cycle. This framework shifts the learner from a passenger to a driver. By forcing them to make choices and see the results, it builds the genuine confidence needed to tackle unknown variables later. The highest level of instruction involves designing friction so precisely that when the learner finally bridges the gap, the solution feels like their own invention.